heard you can draw better if you use your offhand.
What?
You should try it.
How does that make any sense?
Oh, hi. I'm Marc. I've been a professional artist for years, and now I teach art for a living. In this week's episode of my ongoing series, YouTube Art School, we'll go over 5 dangerous art tips you should definitely avoid, but unfortunately, you've probably heard and used before. What are they, though? Well, let me tell you, and oh heck, quickly, let's get this class started. Alright, class is in session. Pay attention. Today I wanted to mention 5 bad tips to avoid. Tips that I've heard my own students repeat after hearing it from their previous teachers probably, or maybe from other random artists either here on YouTube or also likely TikTok. Now, the danger with these tips is when you hear them, they might not sound all that bad at first. But that's the trap. You gotta be careful out there. So anyway, let's get to it. Right after you pay the class fee of either 1 like or 1 sub. Do it, please. Or I won't be able to afford this week's office repairs. Now let's get right into it with the first dangerous art tip that I'm sure you've heard before. Study from old masters. No, stop. Don't do it. Already you might be wondering, why is this on the list of bad tips? Sounds like a good tip. If you've ever gone to a traditional art school, I'm sure your teachers told you to do exactly that. But it's not good advice. Not for most, at least. As a very experienced artist, studying paintings from old masters to figure out their recipes and pick up on some tricks is a good exercise, but not until you have great fundamentals. Fundamentals that are good enough to be able to appreciate every aspect of the technical skills involved, to accurately notice how much certain artists deviate from reality, like what part is a result of their style, and even, the kinds of mistakes they make. It's the same with any skill, really. If you don't know much about something, there's a lot of information that's just going to end up flying right above your head. You just won't pick up on it. Instead, you'll just end up trying to awkwardly copy what you see, and all that's doing is training you to be a better copy machine. And this goes for studying any artist, I guess, not just old masters. To really learn anything, there needs to be some sort of analysis that goes on in your mind. Gesture drawing is a great example of a fantastic exercise for beginners. Sure, it might be a little hard to get a figure that looks like a person initially, but the fact that you're looking at a complex structure like the human body, with colors, shadows, highlights, small skin folds, wrinkles, a lot of visual details, and from there you're extracting only the gesture, the essence of the pose. That's a process of analysis. You're filtering out detail, only focusing on what you need. And this just goes back to why I was saying it's best to study masters when you have the fundamentals for it. At that point, you can actually do this analysis process. And that's what's valuable. That's how we learn best. Now, of course, do it as much as you want for fun, studying old master paintings. That's important too. But don't expect it to be a great learning experience unless you know exactly what you're looking for. The best material to study from for most are photo references, or from life, of course, not old masters. The second dangerous tip is to avoid tracing because it's bad. Wait, what? Tracing is bad, isn't it? It is bad if you're tracing and making the art pass as your own, or not mentioning that you just in fact copied something when you post it for the public to see. That's fraud. No, what I'm talking about is tracing in the context of your studies. Not all tracing is bad. Here's when tracing is good. This is actually part of one of the early assignments from my art school program, for which, by the way, you can get a massive discount by using the coupon in the video description until the end of the month only. It's built for complete beginners and more advanced artists alike. I genuinely recommend it to anyone looking to build the strongest art foundation possible without breaking the bank. For it, you can use Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, Procreate, almost any painting software will do. So check the link to the program in the video description if you're looking for help leveling up your art. There's still a couple of days left in the month. Now, as I was saying, practicing drawing basic volumes over photos like these is a fantastic exercise to help you understand how the body is constructed. We're all made up of some pretty simple volumes, and these volumes are actually what you would draw first if you were to draw from imagination. going from construction first and then the anatomy details. When you trace these volumes over photo references, you're training your eye to associate the two. You're also going to more easily notice proportions when all you're left with are simple shapes void of details. And then when you hide the photo, if whatever is left looks like a convincing mannequin, then mission accomplished. Tracing is not always bad. On the contrary, it's great for studies. The third bad tip now. You might have heard some say, the bigger the challenge, the more you'll improve. I often see my students taking on some big elaborate pieces well before I'd recommend it. But then again, I can't really fault them. I used to do the same. I did this as one of my first digital paintings exactly 20 years ago when I didn't even have a tablet. That was all done with the mouse. Instead of something more simple, I went for level 10 difficulty and kind of failed. I just got fed up with it. And that's usually what I hear from students too. They end up spending many dozens of hours on certain pieces, and it almost always turns into a big struggle to get it completed. Struggling isn't bad, but only in small doses. It's basic psychology. Our brain always craves the positive internal rewards, and we get a big kick out of completing tasks. It releases the happy hormones. We're all hardwired that way. The problem with big challenging tasks is they don't tend to be rewarding enough. We all know how good it feels to call a piece done. Feels great, but when the challenge is too great, these rewards are few and far between and can be very easy to lose motivation. I see it happen all the time. I never recommend big challenges where you'll be running into wall after wall, struggling the whole way. Instead, pick projects that are just a little challenging. Imagine like a thick, lush forest. One side is completely uncharted and the other has a little trail for you to follow. Use the trail. Pick a project where you'll be able to fairly easily do like 60 to 70% of it, and then leave 30 to 40% of challenge. If you challenge yourself too much too frequently, you're almost guaranteed to burn out. Reduce the initial scope of your projects and add to them if you feel like it later. It's much better than going for a big project and having to scale down or abandon it because it's too much. That right there is burnout fuel. The next dangerous tip is when parents or career counselors make it seem like going to a traditional art school will prepare you for work. It will not, for multiple reasons. The first being that art schools are all, almost without exception, extremely outdated, living in the past, mainly because it costs a ton of time and money to update a college curriculum and get it approved. There is so much red tape around that it's an expense that most greedy, money-hungry colleges don't care to have. And then second, of course, teachers, there are rarely successful artists having worked in the industry. They can do their best with the curriculum that's presented to them, but often they were just art students who became art teachers. They don't have the answers you need. The school might teach you some of the art fundamentals, but making the jump to a professional career, which is usually the goal, requires way more than that. What you should do if you want to work in a studio, any studio, is to find a portfolio of artists who already work there. It's one of those obvious things that most people don't think to do. Find a few studios that you like and look them up on like LinkedIn or ArtStation, and then try finding who has them listed as their employers. It should be relatively easy to find. You'll want to look for artists that are not senior, just like regular level or junior level, since those guys will have portfolios with examples of what their studios deem good enough to work for them. Use those portfolios as your artistic targets. And then of course, reach out to those artists too. You'd be surprised just how likely they are to respond back. Ask them about their job, pick their brains as much as you can. What you learn from them will always be wildly more important than whatever your school's old curriculum is about. And junior artists are more likely to respond too. They have less on their plate. Finally, the last tip you probably heard at some point is to learn from a good or popular artist. Surprisingly, maybe, it's not the answer most of the time. Wait, what? Well, good artists don't necessarily make good art teachers. In fact, they often don't. When I started teaching about a decade ago, honestly, my tutorials sucked big time. Doing something and teaching it requires a vastly different skill set. Creating art and teaching how to create art. Look for teachers first, but obviously teachers who can also create art at a professional level. It's hard to teach something you can't do yourself. Finding people who are both experienced teachers and artists is quite rare. I've been focusing on both for many years now, so obviously I'll recommend you check out my content and subscribe if you haven't already. I think it's gotten pretty dang solid over the years, but there are others out there. I'm not the only one. Just make sure that you look for that kind of specific experience. Popular artists usually don't make good teachers. Keep that in mind. So, studying from old masters, avoiding to trace, thinking big challenges help you improve faster, or thinking art school will prepare you for work and that studying from popular artists is a good idea. All these things might seem like good tips to follow, but often the opposite is the case. It all depends on the situation. And well, that's gonna wrap it up for today's class. If this was of any help to you, share it with a bro. Also, if you want to take my favorite line art brush for a spin, you can download it for free in the video description. I have a Photoshop version, part of a larger set of custom brushes that I use daily, and I also recreated it specifically for Clip Studio Paint to have the exact same feel as in Photoshop. Use them responsibly and click the bell to be on time for next week's class. See you then!
What?
You should try it.